Y'all, this is pretty impressive. I have spoken to many of you, and you all clap on rhythm, for crying out loud. Y'all got some soul up in here. I appreciate that introduction. It would have made my mom really proud. She has this saying, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. My dad did, when he hears about, like, boy, you go to Stanford, Oxford, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. My dad would tell me, boy, life is not about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. And so I am impressed to be standing here before a bunch of folk who honor our traditions. You all have to understand right now, there's a lot of people trying to divide our country, to descend us into tribalism, which is the opposite of community. Tribalism is about fear. It's about zero-sum game, us against them. It's about dividing and conquering. Community is about this idea that we are invested in each other, that if your children have a great public school, if your children have great health care, if your kids have a pathway to success, my kids are better. You know, we are a nation that was founded on the idea of creating that beloved community. Our founders in the Declaration of Independence said, hey, we're not founding this nation because we all pray alike. We're not a theocracy because we all look alike, not a common racial background. We're founding this nation on ideas and principles and values, on a moral calling to be a nation of liberty and justice for all. And in order to accomplish that, we got to create community. In fact, the Declaration of Independence ended with this Declaration of Interdependence. It literally said at the end of that document, if we're going to make this happen, we must mutually pledge. It's the last line. We must mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Turn on the TV at night and the 24-hour cable stations and ask yourself about that sacred honor. And folks are trying to make us hate each other and divide each other. That's not what I was taught as a boy. Look, my dad grew up poor. In fact, he said, son, I couldn't afford to be poor. I was just po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. I was a po boy from North Carolina. And he tells this story, which I gotta believe is not true, because every story about his childhood, it got worse and worse. The stories was like the snow or the hail the size of golf balls, then it was basketballs, then it was beach balls. He once told me, boy, let me tell you about when the tsunami hit my town. I'm like, Dad, you grew up in the mountains of North Carolina. No tsunami could have hit your town. I go, boy, don't you disrespect me, man. Thou shalt honor thy mother and father. It happened a long time ago, before the internet, so you can't look it up, but it happened. He said, I was sitting in my classroom and a teacher comes in, she stands before the class and she says, anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid, stand up right now because I want to teach you about self-esteem. And the kids just look at the teacher and wonder what's going on. She goes, come on now. You think you're dumb, you think you're stupid, stand up. And she stood there waiting, nobody moved, but my father said he just pushed his chair back and stood up proudly. And the teacher looks at my father and says, what's wrong with you, Mr. Booker boy? You think you're dumb, you think you're stupid? And my dad said he scratched his head and said, well, shucks, ma'am. I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing. My father taught me, boy, in life, people are gonna talk about you, gonna put you down, but that doesn't define you. What defines you is your willingness to stand up for your values, stand up for your family, stand up for your community, because you gotta stand up in life, and what defines you best is who you stand for, what you stand for. I'm gonna tell you right now, there's a partisanship in our land that is not healthy. I say that as a proud Democrat. My grandfather was a Republican because most blacks in the 1920s and 30s were Republicans. But he switched to a Democratic Party not because he liked to party, not because he liked our mascot. I don't know why we have a jackass as our mascot. You know why he switched? Because it was the Great Depression. And he moved to Detroit, Michigan. And he's the first person in my family to get a job on the assembly lines. He joined a union. And that union stood up not just for themselves, they were fighting for America, for a beloved community. He became a Democrat, he said, because of the values are American values. It's the party of civil rights. It's the party of workers' rights. It's the party of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. It's the party of we and not the party of me. He bragged till the day he died that he went out and turned 14 districts in Detroit to be Democrats. Not because of partisanship, because he knew the pathway to America is what he learned in his union. It's not by dividing people, it's by uniting them. It's not by pushing people down, it's by lifting people up. It's not about telling the world what you're against, it's about giving a compelling vision of what you're for. We need to remember our history. I don't care if you're Irish, if you're Italian, or if you're a black guy from Newark like me. Remember your history. What did Irish do when they came into this country? Huddled masses yearning to be free. They founded unions. You look at the blacks in this nation, Frederick Douglass, most people don't know. Oh, he's an abolitionist. No, he was an abolitionist, and he was the founder of the first major labor union for African Americans. A. Philip Randolph, you think the March on Washington was just about civil rights? The pillars of that were about workers' rights and work with dignity. When Martin Luther King was killed, what was he doing? He was fighting for sanitation workers and workers' rights. At the core of this country is that this will be a nation that if you are willing to work hard, you should have a job with dignity. You should have a job that pays the rent, that gives your family a foundation for your children to reach higher and for their dreams, because that's what America's about. The American dream is about us coming together and carving from humanity the best example of what we can do together to create a better life for all. Shared prosperity, shared possibilities. I love rugged individualism. I love self-reliance, but rugged individualism didn't get us to the moon. That's right. Rugged individualism didn't beat the Nazis, didn't end Jim Crow. We did it because we came together affirming that dream that the lines that divide us are nowhere near as strong as the ties that bind us. That great poet Langston Hughes said it. There's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. And so I'm not in the business of demeaning or degrading folks. I don't want to paint broad brushes and say Republicans are bad. Hell, they're Americans. And I'll tell you this. Now listen, man, I tell you, I know people's feelings. I'm hurt, I'm angry. I walked into a town hall in Iowa, a guy puts his arm around, he sees me, big guy, he was a big guy, he sees this former high school All-American football player, former tight end for Stanford University. The older I get, the better I was. And he puts his arm around me and says, man, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And I look at him and I go, man, that's a felony. And I said, us black guys, we don't get away with that often. I said, look, we're going to win this election not by what we're against, but what we're for. We're going to win this election not by fighting him on his terms and his turf. We're going to win this election not by going to the low road, but like we've beat bullies in the past. We didn't beat Bull Connor because we brought bigger dogs and more powerful fire hoses. We beat him because we unified this country, expanded the moral imagination. Donald Trump has been in office long enough for me to know who you are. My mom used to tell me, who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you say. He got into office, tried to rip health care away from folk, tried to ban people from this country just because of their religion. He didn't pass an infrastructure plan. He passed a tax plan that pushed all of our wealth, trillions of dollars worth of wealth, up to the wealthiest of people. We don't need to define ourselves by what we're against. We need to get back to talking about what we're for and getting back to the core of this country, whether you're a black person, a European immigrant. We know what builds great nations. That's why when I came here, the first thing I did, first bill I went to go do was apprenticeship programs. Because I love this idea of debt-free college. It's part of my platform, but damn it, most Americans don't go to college. We got to have apprenticeship programs that give every child a pathway to 21st century jobs. Well, I'm the only person in the United States Senate that lives in an inner city, low income. The median income where I live is $14,000 per household. This is why I fight. I just came from Newark last night. We need to have a nation where we get back to this understanding. We got to invest in each other. That health care is not a privilege, it is a right for every American. We got to be a nation that says unequivocally, if you work a full-time job in America, you should be able to support your family. One job should be enough. I got folk in my neighborhood that work 2 and 3 jobs but still use food stamps at my local bodega because we're a nation that corporate profits are at an 85-year high. But yet you see wages barely budging over past decades. But more than this, corporations are suppressing wages to increase profits, literally outsourcing their costs on society because people in my community, even though they work full-time jobs with dignity, just like my grandfather did on an assembly line, they can't afford the rent. We have somehow twisted the idea of the American dream that now it's not a dream that's inclusive, it's a dream that's exclusive. This is why we fight. I've spent my life, as said in my introduction, I don't care. I want to go to the toughest problems, the toughest places, because I want to show who we are as a nation. We are the country that has made a way out of no way. We are the country that's come up the right side of the mountain. We are the country that has shown impossible things are possible when we come together and organize. I did that in Newark with my community. People used to look down on us, disregard and disrespect the city of Newark. But I said, not about what people say about us. That doesn't define us. What defines us is how defiant our love for each other. If we can create uncommon coalitions, we're going to create uncommon results. And we turned an American city around, now going through its biggest period of economic expansion, building it our way. When we built our first new hotels, we're going to say they're going to be union labor and project labor agreements. We're going to create apprenticeship programs for our kids. When we built new office towers, we said we want to see people from our community on those work sites. That we want to make sure that growth is inclusive, that prosperity is shared. That's why as a United States Senator, that's why as a presidential candidate, I talk about the ideas that we should be doing. Not tax breaks for the wealthy. We should be expanding worker tax credits in this country. My plan would give 150 million Americans a rise. If you're making less than $100,000 a year, you should get more money back. And in fact, my plan would cut poverty in this country by 1/3 and redefine what work is, because everybody in this room knows someone who works just as hard as we do, but they're at home taking care of a spouse with Alzheimer's or a special needs kid. We're a country that is great because we care about each other, we see each other, we stand up for each other. Every kid born in this country shouldn't stand up and grow up in a country where people who work in hedge funds get better tax treatment than people that teach in our schools. We should make sure every child in this country gets a child savings account. $1,000 put in, and every year you get more money, up to $2,000 based upon your family's income, so that every child, even the poorest amongst us, will get to 18 with some money to invest in a job or buying a house. The poorest Americans would be able to have upwards of $50,000. You could pay for that by mostly by moving what they call the death tax, as they say, but it's the inheritance tax. Just moving that back to what it was in the crazy days of Barack Obama, which would affect less than 1% of the people, would give us the ability to invest in things that matter, like our children. Look, we have to get back to the truth of who we are, which is standing up for each other, investing in each other, healthcare, education, infrastructure, fighting for people to be able to retire with security again in this country. Our pensions are under attack. We should do things to protect our benefits. That's why I'm supporting the Butch-Lewis Act. We are in a nation right now where what is in the balance is not fighting against each other, it's preserving the ideals that make sure every American has that fair shot. There's a lot of talk right now because we're in a presidential season. I'm proud to put my ideas, my grit, my record of going to the toughest places, tackling the hardest problems and turning them around. I'm proud to tell you that the only big bipartisan piece of legislation that's passed under this president was the one that I led with Dick Durbin on the Democratic side for comprehensive criminal justice reform. Because right now our jails and prisons are one of the most shameful things in all of humanity. You look at our jails and prisons, look at other countries, you can tell who they are. Turkey, they imprison journalists. Russia, they imprison their political opposition. In this country, we imprison the poor, the mentally ill, the addicted. Overwhelmingly black and brown people. I tell you, there's no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs or dealing drugs, but African Americans are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for those issues. We've seen our prison population go up 500%. We've neglected our infrastructure in this country, but we are building new prison and jail every 10 days from the time I was in law school to the time I was mayor of the city of Newark. 2017, we had more marijuana convictions than violent crime convictions in this country. So think about this. There are kids that can't get jobs today because they have to check that box for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. We have a nation today that we can't even do common sense things on gun safety. Think about this right now. I'm 50 years old. In my lifetime, more people have been killed by guns in this country than every war we have fought combined. I'm tired of us having a nation where the things we agree on, we can't get done. We all agree that we shouldn't be a nation where somebody puts aside life-saving prescription drugs because he can't afford it. We all agree that we should not be a nation where millions of children can find unleaded gasoline easier than unleaded water. We all agree that we live in a nation that if you were willing to work hard, you should be able to afford a rent or a home. You should be able to take care of your kids. You should be able to retire with security. We all agree. And we can't let our politics become an area where the common good isn't done, because we got a lot of common pain in America, but we're lost that sense of common purpose. I'm running for president of the United States because it's time we unite this country again. It's time that we stand up for each other again. It's time that we reject the politics of pitting people against each other and bring back that politics that my grandfather engaged in that brings us together. I want to end by telling you all what hurts me right now. We still live in a nation where there's so much hurt and pain. I always say, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. Because everybody in this room knows the pain that's going on in our communities. Hell, we could be the first generation not to live longer than our parents, because we've seen over the last years hundreds of thousands of Americans dying from opioid addiction or suicide, deaths of despair. When my father was growing up, literally 95% of baby boomers did better than their parents economically. Now we're down to 50%, a coin toss. The very dream of America, that every generation will do better than the next, is in the balance. And so I want to challenge everybody here. Look, I hope you all support me, but what I really hope that everybody here is doubles down in supporting the American dream. And I want to end by giving you the challenge that I found at one of the points in America where literally a horrific tragedy happened. I mentioned it already. It's where Martin Luther King was assassinated, Memphis, Tennessee. If you went there today and you looked down where Martin Luther King was shot at the Lorraine Motel, you would see a challenge to this generation of Americans. I wasn't alive when King was alive, but when I read what was written in a small block of stone where King was assassinated, I knew that that was the challenge of our generation. And what does it say there? It's actually words from Scripture. Now, I didn't come here to give a sermon. I'm one of these people that says, before you tell me about your religion, show it to me in how you treat other people. And I'm one of these Christians that I would rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian any day of the week. Some of the most soulful people I know have never been to church. But let me tell you what it says from Scripture there. It is literally the lines that Joseph's brothers uttered when they saw Joseph with his coat of many colors, that dream interpreter. They saw him in the distance, and they uttered this line before they grabbed him and threw him into a pit to die. And you know that he didn't stay in that pit. He rose up out of the pit. He didn't die. He went on to lead Egypt, to lead a nation through crisis. That's why you all know the saying that many people have, which is sometimes you got to go to the pit before you go to the palace. Well, we are in the pit right now. We're in a pit when working people can't retire with security. We're in a pit when working people don't have health care. We're in a pit when working people can't afford to send their kids to the college. We're in a pit When mental health crises are treated with prison and jail, we're in a pit right now when our country is being torn apart by people that think they can rise in their political career by dividing us against each other. But what does it say where King was assassinated? This is the words of Joseph's brothers that are written there where King was slain. It says, "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of the dream." I ask all of you right now, my brothers and sisters, what will become of the dream? The dream of our country that our ancestors died for on beaches in Iwo Jima and Normandy. What will become of our dream that our ancestors died for, like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner in Mississippi, registering people to vote? What will become of our dream? Will it become divided? Will it become diminished? Will it become diluted? What will become of our dream? We must answer, because in our generation, like dreamers past, it's our time to dream again. To dream that we can be a nation where everyone has health care, to dream that we can be a nation where apprenticeship programs and colleges are available to all of our kids' genius, to dream again that we can be a nation where hardworking people can retire with security. This is the time for us to dream again, bold dreams and defiant dreams and humble dreams, the dream of America. It will not be diminished. It will not be divided. It will not die, not on our watch. This is the time to dream. And if you will dream with me, if you will stand with me, if we will fight and work together, the dream in our land will survive, and our children will do better than their parents have ever done. Thank you. Hey!